Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock. Time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. And the Browns, they finish at 7-10, a disappointing loss to the Steelers to wrap up the 2022-23 season. Andrew Berry, Browns general manager, Kevin Stefanski, Browns head coach, talking with the media just a little bit ago about the season that was, and without question, a disappointment.
It's obviously a disappointing place to be. We didn't get it done this year. We were just too inconsistent, throughout the season, and there are plenty of areas to work on and improve as we get into the upcoming months. We're going to spend the next couple weeks, really assessing everything, roster, football operations-wise from A to Z, and then, really with the goal of getting us to, obviously, where we're playing meaningful football at this point in the year. That being said, a lot of good people in place, players, coaches, staff, and we're looking forward and energized by the challenge of making the necessary changes and modifications, so that we're playing good football at this point in the year.
And the finality of the season being over is obviously disappointing, but I'm in no way discouraged for the future of this football team. I'm excited about the core of guys that are returning, and then we're just determined to put in the work. We're determined to put in the work this offseason to shape this team and make sure that we really are just playing good football come next September. And there's a bunch of things that we need to look at. We're going to take our time, as you can imagine, as we pull this apart and look at every area that we can improve. I know you guys saw the news. I let Joe Woods go last night. Not an easy decision. I have a ton of respect for Joe, the person, Joe, the coach. He's a great man. He works extremely hard. He treats people the right way. I just felt like it was in the best interest of our football team to go in that direction. But he will land on his feet because he's a good football coach.
And with that, let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. And Jeff, I think it was just a mismatch here. I don't question that Joe Woods is a good football coach. It just wasn't working here.
In 2020, Joe Woods was coaching a defense that didn't have much talent. He was able to have basically a bend but don't break style. If you remember that year, there was the Cowboys game. The Browns got up big, but it became a close game down towards the end. The playoff game, even, obviously, the Browns got out big that day. It became, almost, nail-biter again down towards the end. 2021, with better talent, it started slow, but the Browns, wherever you go by, whoever you recognize or whatever analytic you want to use, the Browns were a top 10 defense. This year, you can give 4 instances. You can give week 2 against the Jets, where it all fell apart. You can go to the Falcon game, where there were running backs for the Atlanta Falcons who weren't even good enough to be on a Cleveland Browns roster, torching them. There was the second Bengal game, and if you remember, defensive back coach came out Friday after the game and said, well, when Higgins and Boyd went out of the game, it kind of made things a little harder for us. You knew things weren't going right then. And then with the Saints game on Christmas Eve, as bad as the weather was going to be, we all basically had the thought process of just do not let Taysom Hill beat you. They could not contain Taysom Hill. Those are 4 instances right off the bat where you knew that this was coming here today.
Yeah, without question. And put a little bit of meat to it. So this is from TeamRankings.com. First quarter defense. The Browns allowed the fewest points per average in the NFL. Let's flip that forward to the fourth quarter, 27th. So one of the worst teams in the NFL in terms of fourth quarter points against. Jeff, to me, that kind of screams you're not making adjustments. If you can stop them coming out of the gate and you can't stop them late, you're not making the adjustments to what's going on the field.
No question about it. And I'll go back again to that second game in Cincinnati. And at that point, Higgins and Boyd had been out of the game. Your only option and only thought process at that point should have been take Jamar Chase out of this game, make somebody else beat us. They were unable to do that day. And there was also, even as we saw this, so, games would be close. Once the other team would get momentum, get ahead, there was nothing that would come from this Browns defense. There was the Dolphin game, and they just get the ball run down their throats for the last, quarter and a half. Somewhere along the lines, yes, maybe the players didn't play as hard for Joe because they weren't agreeing. And we've heard that a bunch today, whether it was John Johnson III or whether it was Greg Newsome. And I think Greg Newsome, his comments today were, when we just played basic coverage, our talent was all we needed. Sometimes you try to get too cute. You try to outsmart people too much. You basically get away from maybe what the strength of your defensive premises, your thought processes, and trying to do too much, and it comes back to bite you. And you saw it. Prime example was the Pickens touchdown from Kenny Pickett yesterday. Here was something that was an issue in week 2. Here was the same thing where it was an issue in week 18, and you got a wide open guy on like 3rd and 15 running right down the hash mark, and there's not anybody within 5 yards of him. These things are going to doom a defensive coordinator. There's going to be major changes within the coaching on that side of that ball. There's going to be major changes within the personnel on that side of the ball. But it's a business. It's a league. You get paid to do it. If you don't perform, sadly, guys lose jobs.
Yeah, without question. And so the question becomes, who are some of the guys that the Browns are looking towards to be the defensive coordinator? And names are already popping up. So the Browns have requested permission to speak with Gerard Mayo. He is a Patriots linebacker coach. Brian Flores has head coaching experience, currently Steelers defensive assistant linebacker coach, not the defensive coordinator, keep that in mind. And Jim Schwartz, Titans defensive assistant, also a guy that does have head coaching experience, was a head coach with the Lions. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Schwartz, really an interesting guy, and he has a long history of being a coach. This is when he was a defensive coordinator for the Eagles. So points allowed, they were 9th. Yards allowed, 13th. Passing yards allowed, 19th. Rushing yards allowed, 3rd. So that's in his career, which was with the Eagles. That's later in his career. You see, he does have some ties to the Browns, being Schwartz. Was a personnel scout in the Bill Belichick days. Defensive assistant under Ted Marchibroda with the Ravens. Then a defensive assistant with the Titans. Eventually became the defensive coordinator with the Titans. And those defenses were really good. That's why he became the head coach of the Lions. Struggled as a head coach, without question. And you see, again, defensive coordinator with the Eagles. That's the numbers that we showed you there. Jeff, I'm of the mindset I would like a guy who has had some head coaching experience. I don't necessarily think you want an up-and-coming guy. And Flores, I'm all in on. I like Schwartz more. They need somebody that is going to be a no-nonsense kind of guy. Stefanski's not a vocal guy, so you need somebody who isn't going to take any crap, if you will.
I think I agree with you there, and that's probably why you're seeing some of these names that you're seeing also, out there. And the Browns are not rumored to him, but Vic Fangio is a free agent right now, so you won't see any report of this. Maybe you would hear that the Browns interviewed him. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to put this information out there. You don't have to get a team's approval. But of course, with Fangio, and then you would go with Flores, then you would go with Schwartz. There was a lot of talk about, in the back of your minds, what happens if next year doesn't start out so well? And maybe then you decide maybe it is time to move on from your head coach, who then would get the bump to be head coach. And, some of these guys, you obviously see they have head coaching pedigree. With a guy like Schwartz at 56 years old, he's been a 3-time defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's a Super Bowl champion. He has been a failed head coach, so obviously he knows what doesn't work as far as being a head coach. Flores is interesting because, I think more of an attacking style, a blitzing style, something where you're going to get maybe more one-on-one looks for Myles Garrett. And if you look at what the Browns are good at right now, Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, you've got cover corners who could perform in a blitzing system. They would probably relish in the role of getting a lot more man, a lot more one-on-one opportunities. So why you're trying to just go ahead and take out, quarterbacks. There's another name I like. He's out there. And again, you won't get linked this way, but Jim Leonard. Jim Leonard played a long time in the NFL, played for the Cleveland Browns, just finished up, as Wisconsin's making major changes with their coaching staff. He's a name I would look out for too. But again, he's a name you don't have to have, any basically litigation to go through to bring in here. But I do like the fact that maybe he's a little bit younger, former player. The juice is still in the blood. Certainly doesn't hurt that he has a relationship with Joe Thomas. But I think first and foremost, the thing that you probably get from what we've heard today is the Browns have known they're moving on from Joe Woods for a couple of weeks. I mean, they got to the ground today. They put out the news that they were done, and they have done, it looks like they've done their due diligence as far as who they want to speak to. And it looks like they want to probably get this wrapped up as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. A couple of more, we'll go through a couple more notes here. Mary Kay Cabot tweets out, Browns also requested permission to talk to Seahawks associate head coach for defense, Sean Desai. He was the Bears defensive coordinator last year. Then the Titans requested permission to speak with somebody in the Browns front office, Glenn Cook, for their vacant GM position. So again, the general manager and front office of the Browns pretty well thought of in terms of around the league. All right, Joel Bitonio and the players also talked. Bitonio talked about the disappointment of where the Browns finished this year.
It's disappointing. It's hard for me to explain. It sounds like an excuse, but the NFL is such a close game business. You know what I mean? Every game's meant to be close. If you look back on the season, like, there's 4 games, 5 games that you're like, even if we flip 2 or 3 of those, it's like we're sitting at 10 wins and you're in the playoffs. And that's something to think back on, but you have to figure out why you aren't executing in those moments. And, you know, I thought about it a lot, honestly, like what's happening in those moments. And it's like, you just have to figure out a way to do it. I think once you start doing it, it just happens. And then you're going to turn, you know, into a, you know, consistent winner.
Yeah, and Jeff, I get where he's going with it, but every team can say that. That's what the NFL is.
Sure. Oh, there's no question about it. And I think for Joel, it's probably, you know, it's definitely a level of frustration from lack of team success. You know, he had that relationship, of course, with Joe Thomas, and, you know, watching Joe, you know, leave at the end when it was over for him, and knowing Joe never got a taste of anything. I mean, at least Joel did miss the playoff game where the Browns beat the Steelers, but did play in the one against the Chiefs. You know, this is what you want. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, everybody, you go into camp every year, and, you know, any NFL team, they'll all tell you the same thing. They think this is our year. We have a shot. And you try to believe that. You tend to believe that. But, you know, you do it 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, you know, and it never comes to fruition. You start to believe, you know, is it ever going to happen? And for a guy like Joel, who's been nothing but, you know, an absolute model citizen to this city, to this franchise, given everything he has, he is just as good a player this year as he was from the first day he got here. You know, it's a difficult aspect, you know, because, you know, you're being truthful about it. You know, as much as Joel Bitonio loves his family, I'm sure he'd like to be busy for the next 3 or 4 weeks with NFL type of stuff. He just, you know, I think he kind of says, and Joel Bitonio kind of feels like a lot of fans do, you know, heck, even if it was just a Super Bowl appearance, you know, maybe a lot of people would just sign up for that. It's just really, really tough that you sit here almost every January and, you know, try to say, well, next year. Well, eventually, you know, it doesn't really hold much weight to it.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. And now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break. We'll come back, head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking with Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
This is Ron from Cleveland, and in my opinion, the whole problem is Stefanski. I think he has a recurring theme of each year not being able to handle the Browns' high echelon players. You know, you can go from Baker to Beckham to Landry to Clowney. It's just a reoccurring theme every year. Kevin's a damn good offensive coordinator, but I think when it comes to the locker room, he just does not have the experience or the know-how of handling the locker room he gets. And it seems year after year, here we go again. And the Browns might need to think about replacing Kevin. I'd love to see Kevin stay on to being, offensive coordinator, but I guess when you're fired from being a head coach, you don't want to take a step down. But I'll let you guys think about that. That's just my opinion. As usual, love the Browns to the end. Love your show, and go Browns. Woof.
Appreciate it very much. appreciate all the voicemails. Jeff, what I would say was the guys that seem to have a problem, Baker and Odell and Jarvis and Clowney, all kind of thought they were, elite. And I would say they're not elite in the NFL any longer. I think that kind of is what screamed to me about Clowney. Clowney, particularly, it's like you're a complimentary piece. The guys that Kevin seems to have problems with that were referenced in the voicemail have all been complimentary guys who thought they should be featured. And they're just not there at that point in their career anymore.
I think there is a lot of it to do that. And then as far as, trying to satisfy certain individuals, Jadeveon Clowney has been a player, has not been happy his entire NFL career. Yeah, there were times in Houston he wasn't happy. There were times in Seattle he wasn't happy. If you talk to Tennessee Titans folks, they'd like their $14.5 million back because he only played one game for them. This was going to be the issue with Jadeveon Clowney this season was Jadeveon Clowney last year at $8.5 million, you got a return of 9 sacks, and you got a highly motivated player. This year, you had to satisfy Jadeveon Clowney by giving him $14.5 million. And you did not get the return on that investment to the point where in October, he's telling his coach as the game's about to start, I'm not playing first and second downs, or I'm not happy doing this. Why are we setting Miles up? He seems to be getting all the easy looks. He's a younger, better player. He's a cornerstone piece. You don't hear these conversations from a gentleman like Nick Chubb. We don't have these conversations about a player like Amari Cooper. We didn't have them about Jacoby Brissett. We didn't have them about Denzel Ward. We don't have these conversations about David Njoku. A lot of this is guys kind of being sour grapes about the fact that they are just not as impactful in the league as they used to be. It's a sad state of affairs, and sometimes some guys don't transition from being a star player to a role player. But that's on them. As far as Coach Stefanski having to walk away because of not being handled some of these players. Granted, Odell was injured all year. Baker hasn't done anything. Jarvis didn't do anything. Basically, guys get replaced in the NFL. It happens all the time. It's more on the player. It's more on the person within inside that uniform to carry themselves and understand what their role is. But as far as handling star talent and top talent, I don't think Coach Stefanski has an issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree with you. All right, Greg Newsome talked about the impact that Deshaun Watson's suspension had on the season for the Browns.
It was definitely a big impact. I can't really speak for the offense, but I can say, Jacoby and Deshaun are two completely different quarterbacks. Jacoby's one of those pocket passers. He can get out, obviously, and, run for a first down. But with Deshaun, I feel like the offense is different. So you kind of are asking guys to kind of run two different offenses in one season. So can't really speak for them, but that's just, from my viewpoint, that's kind of what I've seen. So I definitely think it played a crucial part, but, at the end of the day, I think the guys did a great job in picking up, what he was trying to do and things like that, and I can see the evolution and see them, rising. Obviously, it didn't start off great. My guy was out for, 2 years, so I didn't expect, him to go out there and throw for 500 yards, but I could just see his evolution, and I could just see, going into next season exactly he's going to be back to the Deshaun Watson that we know and we love.
Jeff, certainly hope so. There were glimpses, but he looked like a guy that hadn't played in 2 years, being Deshaun Watson.
There's no doubt. There was definitely still some rust there. But you go yesterday, there was completion for 39, a completion for 34, 19, 17, 15, 14. You see the ability that Deshaun Watson has. And I do think Greg Newsome made a great point about the fact that there was a lot of this offense that was not in fold for the first 12 weeks when Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback. You go to the second touchdown pass yesterday where Deshaun Watson, breaks contain, challenges the line of scrimmage, waits, draws the coverage up, and he finds Nick Chubb just sitting in the corner of the end zone all by himself. These are things that a mobile quarterback can bring you. Obviously, some of the same issues that were in yesterday's game were the same issues that were in towards the end of the season last year when the Browns went into Pittsburgh and they couldn't block anybody. But you see the glimpses are there. I would definitely say you probably need one more impact guy within the passing game. Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Amari Cooper, you see the rhythm there with Deshaun, but you need one more threatful impact. I'm not saying it can't be a David Bell, it can't be a Michael Woods, but you can't just go through this entire offseason into camp and say, we think it's going to be one of them. Bring somebody in. If one of the kids beats them out, that's fantastic. but I think they're probably one solid weapon away in the passing game. And this is also, you have to count for the fact that your best receiving back in Kareem Hunt has probably played his last game here in Cleveland as well.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. So Kevin Stefanski talked about this offseason and getting this offense to something that plays to Deshaun Watson's strengths.
Yeah, I think that's part of this offseason is making sure that we're putting all those things together. Obviously, having the true offseason with Deshaun, starting the season with him, I think will be obviously a big deal as it relates to that. But we want to make sure that we're scoring points any which way we can. We want to give our guys a chance to play fast. I thought there were really moments with Deshaun in there that were some high-level football, and I thought guys were playing really well. And it was the run game, it was the pass game, and those are the exciting parts of this offseason. Just tapping into those things even more, drilling down specifically into what Deshaun does really well, and put together an offense around him.
And I think the offense will look different.
Oh, I agree. And if anything, I think you go and look, it's a copycat league. We hear this all the time. I think you want to do a lot of things with Deshaun Watson that the Kansas City Chiefs do with Patrick Mahomes, where there's the ability to threaten the line of scrimmage. And if nobody's coming up to threaten the quarterback, then the quarterback's going to take the yards that are given. If everybody converges on the quarterback, you get the little dump offs. You get, just find a way to manipulate around it. It was always going to be different when you went from Jacoby to Deshaun, and obviously Deshaun prefers more shotgun, which is understandable. Nick Chubb, it's going to be more of getting acclimated, getting comfortable to being somebody who has to perform more often from the shotgun, maybe a pistol set, things like that. But it's supposed to be for the better overall of the offensive side of the ball, even if that does mean that maybe Nick Chubb's production goes down a little bit, which maybe secures a little longevity on his part. But teams like that, Buffalo Bills, teams with mobile quarterbacks are things that you're trying to look and maybe copycat and put into your own offense and give Deshaun Watson the best, put him in the best position to succeed for this franchise.
Well, the other thing that came up with Deshaun Watson was, his decision to come to Cleveland. Here's what Watson had to say today about his decision to come to Cleveland to play for the Browns.
I'm not very happy with my choice. I'm very I love being here. I love being in Cleveland. My family loves coming up here to Cleveland. I love this locker room. I love the players. I love the coaching staff. They made it a lot easy for me to transition and come in and be the person I need to be. So I'm looking forward to the improvements. I'm looking forward to what the future holds for us. And I'm excited to be a Cleveland Brown, and I want the best for this city. I want the best for this organization and everyone in this locker room. So, like I said before, the ultimate goal is to try to get to that Super Bowl. And that's what we got to continue to push for. We got to hold ourselves to a higher standard. I got to hold myself to a higher standard as a player, as a person, and as a teammate and as a leader. So, that's what we're going into 2023 thinking of. And I want to continue to have those standards very, very high. And, everyone got to hold me to that standard also.
So, Jeff, when you hear that, head's in the right place, it appears.
Look, and this is one thing, and look, we can't condemn it, obviously, but Deshaun Watson himself has been through a lot. Granted, it's all his own doing, and then and this is one thing I don't think a lot of us talked about that we probably should have was the 700-day layoff, and then basically coming to a team, getting to participate in training camp, then basically being exiled for a long period of time. Then when you're first allowed back in the building, you're not really a part of the team just yet. Then the transition is made where you are a part of the team. But here it is. Now you're going through all of this adversity within your own life, granted, which was self-inflicted. But now here you are trying to reinvent yourself. And it's a brand new system. It's a brand new city. It's brand new teammates. It's largely, new opponents. And also keeping in mind, even the opponents that he was familiar with, how much roster overturn did they have in the 2 years since the last time that he played this game? So it was always going to be a difficult thing in this 6-game stretch for Deshaun Watson. Now he knows where he is. He knows exactly how his offseason is going to go. He knows exactly when his OTAs are going to go. He knows exactly how training camp is going to go. So for him, you're looking for a major, major upgrade in his play here. Come September, as he's more acclimated, he's more comfortable, kind of feels like he's more of the guys. Jacoby Brissett, most intensive purposes, is probably going to be moving on here. So this just becomes more and more Deshaun's team, Deshaun's brand. And, for the Browns and their fans, you hope that this is going to lead to, obviously, the heavy investment that the Browns put into him.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Andrew Berry, Browns general manager, talked about the struggles that the Browns had on the defensive side of the ball.
Honestly, when we're sitting here at this time of year and we look at the unit's performance, we didn't necessarily have the right mix in all areas, and you really look at everything. You really have to, and that's not just talent or scheme. It's some of those other factors as well. But Kevin mentioned this game is won on the margins, right? I think Kevin, gave us a stat that I think what he said, half the teams are between 7 and 10 wins, and I think probably all 18 teams that are sitting here today could probably say, man, if we just had these 5 plays back during the year, our record could be from where we are now to something different. And with the margins being so razor thin, you really do have to look at everything and make sure that everything's tied up in order to win football games.
And Jeff, I think one of the things that will take into account is the defensive coordinator, obviously, and that mix between the defensive line and the linebackers and the whole personnel packages that they're using.
No question. Look, this team needs a very, very drastic overhaul on the defensive line. If you wanted to make a case for maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 possibly staying at the defensive line, I'm here to listen to it. You had a really, really weird scenario at the linebacker position where 5 linebackers went on injured reserve. But you got some of your best linebacker play the last few weeks with Tony Fields, who was basically the low man on the totem pole when the season started. Reggie Rangel and Deion Jones. These guys were not here very long, but they came in and brought in, solid play here. So with the NFL, and it just seems where there's offensive line, defensive line, trench play just dictates so much towards whether or not teams are going to be successful. And you look at teams like the Buffalo Bills who run 9 deep on the defensive line. You look at some of the better teams. You can rotate guys out for extended periods, not just, hey, Miles, go back over there, get yourself 7 seconds of air, and then we need you right back here. But a lot's going to have to be done. And we'll see the way it works. And, until a new defensive coordinator is named and we can kind of get into his tendencies and his theories and, the way he likes to handle his shop, we'll get a better idea of it. But, we know who the core of this defense is. That's going to remain intact. And the core of this defense is a pretty solid core.
All right, so we talked last segment a little bit about the offense looking different for Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson and Joel Bitonio addressed that same topic. How different will this offense look next year?
Most definitely, I think it would be totally different. We've seen glimpses of what we wanted to do, but I think it'll be a lot different for sure.
I think we saw glimpses of what we can be with his, ability to improvise, ability to make the big pass when we need to get out of sacks. Also, opens up, the run game for Nick. So I think the last couple of weeks, we haven't given him the ball as much, but his efficiency has been a lot better, run and pass for Nick. So you see all those things where it's hey, the goal is to maximize our offense for everybody in it. You know what I mean? And if that's spreading them out and letting Nick run in 6 and 7 man boxes instead of 8 or 9 man boxes, I think it's a big advantage for us. And I think you saw glimpses of what we can do second half of Washington, some of those touchdown drives we had yesterday. And obviously there's things we need to work on. I think we have to understand, the scramble drill a little bit better. We have to understand our protection, how he's going to move out the pocket, things like that. But I think you saw glimpses of what could be good.
And Jeff, when you look at this offense, I think the wide receiver that they want to find is somebody who gives people problems in space. Could even be a running back, somebody that you can get the ball in his hands in the open quickly and who creates and puts pressure on a defense.
I agree with you. And maybe, he never obviously got to play this year, but the Browns did invest in a player like Jakeem Grant last year. His season came to an end very early with a ruptured Achilles. He was a player they valued as a returner, but you saw times where he was involved in offenses through his time in the NFL. And he's just one of these guys where he gets the ball in his hands, and if he's in space, just basically scares the daylights out of you. Because whether it's his speed, whether it's his wiggle ability, just a real solid weapon. The Browns did bring in Jalen Darden. He got a little taste of playing time yesterday. This is a player that has that sort of type of ability. But again, that's the guy you're looking for because you have the consistencies of Nick. You know exactly what you have in Amari. Donovan's great at the contested catches. David Njoku rolls well on the rollouts and the boots and all that stuff. But you just need a general guy because normally you always want to say in a 3rd and 8, oh, my God, just make sure you throw it to the sticks. But when you have those type of special guys who have that type of ability, special ability in the open field, you can throw them a 3-yard pass and have confidence that they'll find a way to pick up the remaining 5, 6, 7 yards to keep the chains moving. That's going to be a big, big, tough find for them. And I do think Joel made one good point as far as, scramble drill. And you saw a lot of it. First off, you saw players just assuming Deshaun was going to go down at times, and everybody kind of stopped, and everybody was like, oh, my God, he got out of that. And then, but you have to learn how to work, and it's a really, really difficult thing to practice because it just doesn't really work that way. It's something that's really got to come in a game because you kind of got to feel where defenses are, and you got to find the open spot to help your quarterback out. But there's a lot of work to be done. But look, everybody's positive, everybody's committed, everybody knows there's work to be done. It's not like everybody's saying this is as good as it's going to be. Everybody's saying the right things, that they know it should be better, they know it will be better. And, that's what you have to be looking for at the end of the day.
All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
My name is Darquan. Wanted to speak on the Jadeveon Clowney and the Browns situation. I feel like Kevin Stefanski and the Browns organization messed over Jadeveon Clowney and his contract. If he wasn't injured, I think he should have been playing in this game. Miles, earlier in the season or a couple weeks ago, just did something that Stefanski didn't like, and they benched him for the first quarter or the first phase of the quarter. I feel like Jadeveon Clowney should have been scheduled to a reduced role for the end of the season game and still help to finish the season off. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski got to get out this way of paying these players and not using them. That's all I got to say.
All right. Appreciate all the voicemails. Jeff, I think they did the right thing. Matter of fact, if they would have known what happened, if what happened against Baltimore literally happened, they should have sent him packing that next week.
Look, you have 3 instances alone from this season. You have week 2 where apparently he was mouthing off, whether it was coaches or whether it was players, basically calling them losers. Then you have the first incident with the Baltimore Ravens. And now, the hit piece. And look, he knew exactly when he sat down with Mary Kay Cabot and said the words he did. You know what he said? My season is over because no NFL team is going to let me play for them after I say these things. And you want to know what? And for me, that's the part that's a little disingenuous, part that upsets me a little bit because in 2020, the Browns were one of the few teams chasing Jadeveon Clowney, went down to Tennessee. Why? Because they paid him more money. Knee was banged up, took $14.5 million, played 1 game. Browns still chased him in 2021, eventually got him into the fold, had a successful season. They put together a successful plan for him to succeed, which allowed him to in turn get a $14.5 million contract for this season. So I don't know what in the world his issues are because he got paid $14.5 million this year, and there is not another NFL team that would have paid him even close to that. So sometimes you got to take the player's words and actions and equate it versus is it him or is it the situation? Because for Jadeveon Clowney, this was all about him, and he decided he wanted to end his story in Cleveland the way he did.
All right, before we go to break, what do you think the biggest positional issues or needs are when you're looking at this roster moving forward? I think we've kind of touched on them a little bit, but let's nail them down there.
I would say, look, whatever they say about Jedrick Wills, look, there are some consistency questions. There's no question about it. The center position, Ethan Posick, which turned out to be such a great gift for this team. How much is now Ethan Posick worth? Is that something the Browns are going to be able to handle? But it is that defensive line. Look, Myles Garrett, I think Alex Wright's going to be a decent player for them. Perrion Winfrey, if he can continue on this path that he was on towards the end of the season here, he is a part of it. But this team legitimately probably needs right now, because are you thinking Alex Wright is ready to start? I'm not sure if he is. Taven Bryant's a free agent. you need minimum 2 starting defensive tackles and a starting defensive end. And so you're talking about 4, 5, maybe 6 bodies that the Browns need on the defensive line. You need somebody to help you stop with the run, and you also need, somebody else that can show, because the one thing you didn't see from Alex Wright, you saw some good things. Isaiah Thomas, same thing. You didn't see enough pass rush ability from these guys. The Browns have a ton of work to do, and it's going to be on that defensive line room. Chris Kiffin, the defensive line coach, I'm assuming they'll probably move on from him, because if you're going to bring in all new players anyway, I'm not really sure what the sense is to keep the same guy coaching these players. But you look at that defensive line room, and these Browns need major, major help, because a lot of these good teams that are going to be playing for the next few weeks, they can rotate in 7, 8, 9. They've got specific fits in their defensive line for short yardage, for first down, for nickel, for dime. And that's something the Browns don't have the luxury of right now. And that's something they need to start trending towards, because as you saw the last couple of weeks, they were able to move Myles Garrett around a little bit. He's even more effective in that route. And the key to that is having guys that can hold their own and do the jobs that you're asking them to do.
Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast, and now I'm going to step aside, take one more timeout. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. Browns general manager Andrew Berry talked about addressing the leadership on the defensive side of the ball.
I think the bigger focus is effectiveness of leadership as opposed to necessarily style of leadership. So ultimately, are we getting the results and the outcomes that are desired? And I think also the other thing is, people are leaders in different ways, as you mentioned. So I'd probably more focus on effectiveness as opposed to, hey, you need X amount that are in this way, X amount are that way.
And Jeff, that goes to the quote unquote vocal leaders that the Browns did not have. For whatever reason, something just was not right on that side of the ball pretty much all year.
No, and again, we all saw it started week 2 in the collapse against the New York Jets. But there was weeks, where it was a secondary issue, the New York Jets game. There's weeks where it was, linebacking issues, the Atlanta Falcons game, which Shady Clowney and Myles Garrett didn't play. There were weeks where the fact that you didn't have enough of defensive tackle. So the problem is it's hard to lead when essentially maybe every room had their issues at the time. And the other thing is, leadership is a great, great word to have, but it doesn't necessarily equate to victories. This is something everybody wants to pull out when a team is not playing well or a team is not performing well. Normally, where does leadership come from? Teams that have experience at winning, and then they develop the leadership from winning. So you just don't walk in with it necessarily like people want to believe. So it's tough, and it's a catchphrase. A lot of it also needs to come maybe from, and obviously for this case, the defensive side of the ball needs to come from your defensive coordinator. But your defense coordinator was having his own issues as well. So even if you were trying to lead, who's to say necessarily that anybody is listening or anybody's willing to follow? Look, leadership, yes, it's a key component. But I think the more leadership that develops within a locker room, develops within a team, comes through winning ball games. If you're not going to win games, there's always going to be questions of leadership. There's always going to be questions of whether or not a locker room is divided or not.
Yeah. Winning creates cures pretty much everything. Losing creates a lot of problems. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Howard from Marin County. If you remember, in the beginning of the year, I predicted the Browns would get 6 wins. I was off by 1. It was pretty bad. They have a lot of problems. The offensive line was absolutely awful. The defense couldn't get off on third down. Deshaun was running for his life. They have a lot of problems. I personally think there's no guarantee they're going to be any better next year. In fact, if they don't fix the lines, offensive and defensive lines, it will probably be worse. They have to play the NFC West If it were me, I'd flush them all. The general manager and the things he's done, the coaching staff, I would flush them all. It's wonderful talking with you. It was a very disappointing year. Take care, Dave. Have a good year. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, I don't think they're that far away from being where they want to be. But you say that, and, the old saying, you are what your record is. 7 wins is not getting it done. But I don't think it's devoid of talent. It needs tweaking, not total reconstruction.
Well, the defensive side of the ball, that's one story, because obviously everything is going to change over there once you bring in a new defensive coordinator. But, one of the main premises we've been talking about on this show is, where is this offense now? Where is Coach Stefanski with his offensive philosophies and theories? And as far as that equating to what is the best offensive system when you have a player like Deshaun Watson, that's where it's going to have to be key. And, Coach, to his credit, he did speak on that today and basically, put himself in a position where, I'm going to have to be more flexible, because the most important thing for me is what is best for this team, what is best for this offense, and ultimately what is best for Deshaun Watson, obviously. So if it's, now I'm not saying scrap the playbook, but, anything running game-wise, I think there's nothing wrong with that aspect of the offensive side of the ball. But I think there needs to be a hard look, and Deshaun spoke as well, as we need to sit down. We need to look a lot of tape, and there's going to be stuff in there that, you basically just going to take out the red pen. Nope. And then you're going to go copycat. You're going to look at other teams who have quarterbacks similar to Deshaun's athletic ability and throwing talent, find what works for them, find a way to tweak it, bring it in yourself, get a little colorful every now and then to keep the guys engaged. Everybody saw that Chiefs play the other day where the guys were all running around like they were at a snow globe before they went and lined up. That's keeping your guys engaged. You do something like that, that makes everybody in the room like, wow, this is what every day's different. You come to work, you never know what you're going to expect. It may seem like a small, silly thing, but when that came and it was time to run it, those players were amped up because they knew it was different. They knew it was kind of silly. But have fun with it, and don't be afraid to go out of the box every now and then. Be a little different, be a little creative, challenge your guys, give them something that they're excited about. You're the offense. You're dictating everything. So when I see a huddle where the guys are spinning around, my first instinct on the defensive side of the ball would have been timeout, because what is about to come out of this? You just get, Coach Stefanski, to his credit, very buttoned up under the vest. I think Coach, maybe if he were to come out of his shell a little bit, let his players on the offensive side of the ball see that, I think it would help greatly. It truly would, because it almost seems like when something doesn't work, it's like, everybody seems to lose a lot of breath. Whereas everybody getting there, knowing they're doing something different, knowing there's something exciting, definitely going to keep a lot more heads focused when they need to be.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. Happy New Year, sir.
All right, Happy New Year's to you again. Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out, Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jackson McCurry, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
the ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
When the whole Kevin was hired and we were looking for defensive coordinators, I had noticed that on Joe Wood's resume, he literally went from a top 5 defense, which we were last year, to a 22nd ranked defense. And that's how his stint was in Denver. And I literally said about months ago, like, how the qualities that he presented in Denver were showing up here in Cleveland. But like everybody is saying, I think that we should get a veteran presence in the defensive coaching room, somebody who's a lot possibly older, but I wouldn't mind going younger because that's what a lot of people are doing now. But yeah, go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry, the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. Jackson, it doesn't seem like they have a specific quote-unquote trait qualities in mind, because you've got guys like Schwartz and Flores who've been head coaches, and you got guys like Mayo and Desai who are young kind of up-and-comers. So it sounds like Kevin Stefanski's keeping an open mind in this search.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you can't go in with just, oh, we want to target this guy. I think you have to cast a wide net, interview as many people as possible. I think that's a good way to formulate who you truly think is going to be the best option, because, they can interview, like, say, Flores and Schwartz and then just completely whiff if, somebody else comes along and goes to another team and has a great defense, and then everybody's going to be like, well, why didn't the Browns interview that guy? Why did they let him walk to another team? So I think they do it the right way. I think they formulate a good process, search high and low for the best candidate possible, and hopefully they find that right guy.
When you're looking at this, what do you want to see? The thing I want their defense to be more aggressive. I don't care who it is. I want that defense. They were too passive and reactive. I want to see an aggressive style of defense.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see an aggressive style too. That's why I think out of all the candidates mentioned so far, Jim Schwartz would be my top choice, just because he's always had an aggressive style defense, whether it was in Tennessee, whether it was in Detroit when he was the head coach, or when he was the D coordinator in Philly. Like, he always had an aggressive style defense, and I seem to like that. I liked Greg Williams when he was here as defensive coordinator. Not saying I would like Greg Williams back, even though some Browns fans are clamoring for it. But someone that is aggressive, has a knack for creating turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, that would be somebody that I would like the most when during this searching process.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That's a name that I liked when I saw that, as well as Jim Schwartz. All right, Greg Newsome today talked about, was it a lack of leadership that led to a disappointing 7-win season for the Browns?
Yeah, I don't think that, wins and losses, I don't really necessarily believe that's a leadership issue. I feel like our leaders are doing an amazing job. You can tell, you can walk around the, locker room and see us 7-9, whatever our record is, we still having fun with each other, still being together. So I don't necessarily think leadership kind of shows wins and losses. So I wouldn't say it's a leadership issue, but obviously it can improve, and I think that's just being with each other more. A whole nother offseason. Obviously, getting Ford back for a whole entire season will be great for us as well. So he gets out there and shows more what he can do. So I don't think leadership was really the problem.
Jackson, the only thing I would say is the way you lost some of those games kind of points a finger towards leadership on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think there was a leadership issue, not only on the roster, but I think in coaching. The accountability wasn't being held by, for mistakes being made. Obviously, things that happened with Clowney, Perrion Winfrey earlier in the season, like, those guys are being held accountable. But I just think, like, the execution on the field, that goes back to, the players not doing their job, the coaches not putting them in the right positions. And I think that's where the leadership comes into. I think there's good leaders on this side on the defensive side of the football. Myles Garrett, John Johnson in times I think was a good leader, but they were lacking stuff. Last year they had Malik Jackson. I think he was a good defensive leader. Anthony Walker, when he went out, you could see, some of the leadership there went away. So, they need to add some more vocal leaders on the defensive side of the ball. But I also think you have guys that lead by example, like Myles Garrett, like Anthony Walker, who I hope they bring back. But, yeah, there was definitely a leadership issue on that defensive side of the ball, and hopefully it gets cleaned up with whoever the new defensive coordinator will be.
All right, Andrew Berry talked about the trade for Deshaun Watson, his suspension, and did that really impact the Browns' ability to compete this year?
I think two things can be true. I think number one, the circumstances regarding the trade for Deshaun in terms of, managing it for Kevin and the staff, that's certainly a challenge this year. At the same time, I think both of us would tell you that, we wouldn't use that as an excuse for this year. We obviously got really good quarterback play from Jacoby. We felt like we had enough, good players and enough opportunities to ultimately win games this year to end at a different point in the season. But I also certainly don't want to, minimize the unique dynamics in terms of managing the team on a week-to-week basis, for Kevin and his assistants.
And earlier in the show, we kind of heard, relative to Watson and Brissett, it's basically two different offenses. So it's a challenge. And again, it's not an excuse. I mean, you chose to take on that challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think they expected an 11-game suspension right away. I think they probably thought it was going to be in the 6 to 8 range, which seemed to be what a lot of people thought, as the summer led on. But, yeah, I mean, it was difficult. They were implementing two different offenses, one for Jacoby, one for Deshaun. But I don't think the team has any regrets about making the trade. I think they would have liked a lesser suspension so they had more time with this offense with Deshaun, because obviously the last 6 weeks were not good by any means. But now you get a full offseason with Deshaun there. There's not going to be too many distractions there. You're going to have most of the offense back. Hopefully they add a speed threat at the wide receiver position, maybe a new offensive tackle on the left side. I don't know what they're going to do with Jed here in his 5th-year option. But, yeah, just add a few more pieces to this offense. You're bringing the majority of it back. You have the whole offseason to implement it the way you want to run it. And I think 2023 should hopefully be a better season for Deshaun and the rest of the Browns offense.
Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk offense and head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I've been a huge supporter of Stefanski all season long, even throughout the 1-6 horrible stretch that the Browns went through earlier in the season. After the Steelers game, I can no longer defend him. Only 12 carries for Nick Chubb? I mean, that's downright negligence. I mean, what is he waiting for? It's the end of the season and you still limit him to 12 measly little carries? I was looking at the entire team to see if they pack it in. And I'm sorry, the majority of the team did seem like they packed it in. I just don't know what to do about Stefanski. On one hand, I want him to be the coach for the next 10 to 15 years. But on the other hand, I just don't feel like he is the right coach for this team. He refuses to use his best players, and the rest of his staff are just so robotic and so boring and vanilla. It's despicable. I just want this team to win, and I truly believe we have our franchise quarterback finally, but I really don't think we have our coach. Thanks. I'm just a confused Browns fan that doesn't know which way to go.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jackson, that's kind of the way it goes when you expect one thing and you get 7 wins. That's what happens with back-to-back disappointing seasons. I get where the fan base is with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, just in these last 6 games alone, I think they produced 5 offensive touchdowns, which it's definitely disappointing, especially with Deshaun back. We expected a little bit more production on the offensive side. But, to people that say they don't use their best players, Amari Cooper had a career year. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a career year. Nick Chubb joined Jim Brown as the only running back to rush for over 1,500 yards in a Browns uniform. I get the disappointment. I'm disappointed too. A 7-10 season is disappointing and missing the playoffs, but I still believe in Kevin Stefanski. I think, this offseason is going to be crucial. Obviously, I think he's going to enter 2023 on the hot seat. It's a make or break year, I think, for the entire regime, but I still think he's a good play caller. And I think there's still a lot to look forward to, like a full offseason with this offense, getting everybody on the same page, chemistry-wise, timing-wise. I think 2023 is going to be a better season for the Browns than it was in 2022.
I'm with you. It will be time for some results, without question. All right, Deshaun Watson talked about helping to shape this offense moving forward with Kevin Stefanski.
You mentioned about sitting down with Kevin and talking some things out, and maybe pointing out some changes you may look at in the offense. What you have some specifics in mind that you want to address with him?
Not right now, honestly. That's something I think me and Kevin personally should talk about. Just between us instead of putting it out there. But we're going to sit down and met with him today. We're going to have a man-to-man conversation. Nothing negative or anything like that, but just what can we do to be better offensively and as a team. Because my next step in taking this team and taking that leadership role is really stepping out there and really taking this whole locker room under my wings. And I'm looking forward to that. This year was kind of tough with the being in the building, being outside the building, all the different changes and all the unknowns. But going into this 2023 season and having a pretty clear view of what we can look forward to, I think I can have the opportunity, and that's the role I want to make sure I challenge myself and take over.
And Jackson, that's one of the better things that I think we heard is that it sounds like Kevin Stefanski is going to tailor the offense around the quarterback, which indicates he thinks he has his quarterback. You don't do that with, the 2 quarterbacks that have preceded him.
Yeah, definitely. I think, for what the Browns gave up to get Deshaun Watson, he's definitely the franchise guy. And I think that's a great sign that him, Stefanski and Watson are going to sit down here in the coming days, and as long as the league allows them to spend time together to sit down and go over what this offense needs to suit Watson and to suit the players that they have on the offense. If they need to go out and get better receivers, get a better tight end or something at running back, I think, the Browns will try to do that with the resources they have. I think Jeff mentioned it. I mentioned it. A speed threat at wide receiver would be very good for this. It'll open things up, I think, even more for Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper. At the end of the day, they got to do what's best for Deshaun Watson, what best suits him, because he's the quarterback. He signed the fully guaranteed deal. The Browns gave up a ton to get him. They have to make sure this works with Deshaun Watson, and Kevin Stefanski most certainly needs to make it work with Deshaun Watson because, like I said, it's a make or break year coming up for him.
Without question. All right, before we let you go, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason one more time.
This is Dawgland, Cleveland, Ohio. Kevin Stefanski needs to hire a OC pronto. We didn't sit here and watch Kevin Stefanski be out-coached for 2 seasons back-to-back. COVID season was a fluke. Everybody was losing their starters. We can't sit here and keep telling this man that he's a genius on this ball field, bro. He's not running the ball enough with Nick Chubb, and it's just a lot. Thank you for letting me call in. Hopefully I'll make it on the show.
All right, as always, appreciate all the voicemails. Again, Jackson, we've talked about it. There have been offensive players that have had career years. Look at what the offense did with Jacoby Brissett as well. Let's see what the offense looks like with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback for an entire season.
Absolutely. And, to the offensive coordinator thing, there was the report a couple weeks ago that Jimmy Haslam likes the air raid system. I think the Browns are going to go to a pass-based offense. I know we've relied on the running game, and that's how we've set up this offense. I think we're going to flip the script, go to that pass-based offense, not because Jimmy Haslam wants it, but because I think, you look at the teams around the league. How are they so successful offensively? By throwing the football, by passing the ball downfield and putting points on the board. The Browns need to get to that point, regardless of having a great back like Nick Chubb. If we want to get to the Super Bowl, which is the ultimate goal, you gotta flip the script, go to a pass-based offense, go to a pass attack offense, which is, I think, obviously is something Stefanski's not accustomed to. Maybe they bring in somebody onto the offensive staff that can help him with that. Cliff Kingsbury got fired today. I don't know if he's going back to college. I don't know if he'd take a coordinator or an assistant role, but somebody like that that's had like a pass attack offense that could help Stefanski retool this offense to Watson's liking.
Jackson McCurry, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Good stuff, Jackson. Thanks very much.
Thanks as always for having me on, Dave.
All right, Jackson McCurry, make sure you check him out. The Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.